The 2019 NBA trade deadline is rapidly approaching, and there are plenty of franchises who are looking to be buyers as we move closer and closer to February 7th. With that being the case, Colin Ward-Henninger of CBS Sports has taken a look at the most realistic trade piece that each of the league's 30 teams has to offer ahead of the deadline in hopes of making a splash big enough where they could vault themselves forward in the conversation concerning which teams can ultimately challenge the Golden State Warriors for the Larry O'Brien Trophy later on this year. While there are no guarantees that any of the players listed below are going to be moved by the trade deadline, there is little doubt that their names will be coming up on each and every trade call that is placed between now and the end of the first week of February. Feel free to share your thoughts on which players on this list you believe can or should be moved by their current team by the deadline in the comments section below. Dwayne Dedmon, a 7-footer capable of protecting the paint on defense while stepping out to hit three-pointers on offense, 38% this season. Dedmon is on an affordable expiring contract that could be quite attractive to a contender looking to beef up its front-court rotation. With John Collins emerging as a potential future All-Star, it's not hard to see the Hawks dealing Dedmon in exchange for a draft pick or a young asset. Terry Rozier, jokingly considered untradeable in Celtics circles for years, Rozier is set to be a restricted free agent at the end of the season. If Danny Ainge and the Boston front office feel he'll get an offer they're not willing to match, which seems likely given the amount of teams that will have cap space this summer, they might be better off getting something for him before the trade deadline. Like Brown, Rozier has regressed from last season, so a change at backup point guard could be in the works. Shabazz Napier has helped the Nets this season, but if and when LeVert comes back he'll be pushed back out of the rotation with D'Angelo Russell, Spencer Dinwiddie and Joe Harris at full strength. He's shown enough this season that a team could be willing to part with a future second-rounder to get some assurance at the backup point guard position, and that might be a worthwhile move for Brooklyn. Frank Kaminsky. Frank the Tank has fallen completely out of the rotation in Charlotte, behind Bismack Biyombo of all people, so it appears the Hornets have no plans for Kaminsky to play a prominent role in their future. A 7-foot stretch 5 who shot 38% three-pointers last season with regular playing time, Kaminsky could help space the floor for another team's bench unit. The only question is whether anyone's willing to part with assets to get him, rather than wait until his restricted free agency this summer. Robin Lopez. There are plenty of teams, namely the Warriors, who would be interested in Lopez if he hits the buyout market, but the Bulls are playing hardball, insisting that they won't buy out the rough-and-tumble veteran center. If teams are convinced Chicago won't change its stance, they may be willing to surrender a second-round pick or another asset to pick up Lopez in his expiring contract, though it will be hard to match salary. J.R. Smith has been in exile for most of the season as the Cavs looked for a way to trade him, but around this time of year teams tend to have a better idea of their needs, and sometimes get a bit desperate. The price is low for Smith, who's had issues but also has undeniable playoff pedigree, so it's not hard to imagine a team picking him up for the stretch run. Helping his case is the fact that his salary is only partially guaranteed for next season. Wesley Matthews and his expiring contract could be attractive to a contender looking for playoff depth. His defense has declined, but Matthews is still a tough, playoff season vet who's shot a consistent 38% three-pointers over the course of his career. Teams should be, and will be interested. Torrey Craig has been a pleasant surprise over the last 2 seasons for the Nuggets, and has started the majority of games he's played this season, but Denver would be foolish not to look for an upgrade. Adding a better shooter, Craig is at 31% this season, to their already potent starting lineup would give them the firepower to compete with the teams at the top of the conference. The problem is whichever player they get would also have to provide Craig's defense, which is no easy task. Reggie Jackson is having his worst season yet in another year of not living up to the 5-year, $80 million contract he signed with the Pistons before the 2015-16 season. It will be hard to find a team to take on Jackson's deal, but there could be one willing to foot the bill to have Jackson go back to the bench role in which he thrived with the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's a long shot, but he's really the only trade chip the Pistons have. Damian Jones. The Warriors have had a revolving door at center for the past 2 seasons prior to the return of DeMarcus Cousins, and Jones filled in admirably before going down for the season with a pectoral injury. He played well enough to perhaps pique the interest of other teams, and he's probably expendable in the Warriors' eyes. If they could fetch something worthwhile for him, they might jump at the opportunity. Marquise Chris was an interesting piece when he came over from the Suns in the Ryan Anderson deal, but the team just signed Kenneth Faried so that they wouldn't have to play Chris in Clint Capella's absence. Safe to say, head coach Mike D'Antoni isn't a fan. The 6'10" Chris is still an intriguing prospect, though, having been drafted number 8 overall in 2016. He's a tremendous athlete who's shown the ability to hit threes, so a team could be willing to take him off the Rockets' hands at a rock-bottom price. Thaddeus Young. This spot would have belonged to Tyreke Evans were it not for the devastating injury to Oladipo. Now, with a deep playoff run likely off the table, the Pacers have to start thinking about what they can get for Young, whose $13.7 million contract expires at the end of the season. He's been playing extremely well, so there could be several teams that come calling. Mike Scott's minutes have dwindled recently, as he's lost time to two-way player Jonathan Motley, not a good sign. Scott's three-point percentage is still good, 36%, but his overall field goal percentage, 39%, is way down, and he clearly hasn't fit into the Clippers' second unit the way he did in Washington last season. Scott has shown that he can be a productive member of a playoff team, so he could have some interested parties as the deadline approaches. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. There have already been rumors about KCP being shopped, and he seems to welcome a change of scenery. His $12 million expiring contract will work nicely as a salary filler in a larger deal, or the Lakers could choose to swap him for a player they find more useful, Marc Gasol. Things are going to get worse in Memphis before they get better, so dealing one or both before the trade deadline seems highly likely, assuming they can find the right partner. Wayne Ellington. With the return of Dion Waiters, the Heat backcourt is extremely crowded, and Ellington seems to be the odd man out for now. Teams always need shooting, and at 6'5", Ellington can hold his own defensively. There's definitely a contender out there who would gladly swoop up Ellington, and the Heat's asking price can't be very high at this point. Pat Connaughton. After signing with the Bucks last summer, Connaughton has fallen out of the rotation behind Sterling Brown and George Hill. Connaughton was a productive member of the Blazers bench last season and has played well in stretches for the Bucks, so he could help a team looking to add athleticism to its reserve unit. Taj Gibson fits the bill of a veteran leader brought in to help stabilize a playoff contender's rotation, and the Wolves have Dario Saric waiting in the wings as the heir to the starting power forward throne. Gibson's expiring deal only makes him that much more enticing for teams, so there's a real possibility he'll be elsewhere come Feb. 81 Moore. New Orleans keeps hoping that Moore will develop into a consistent scorer alongside Davis and Drew Holiday, but he just hasn't yet achieved that level. He's under a reasonable contract, unlike, say, Solomon Hill, and has proven himself to be a quality rotation piece. The problem is the Pelicans need some big improvements if they're going to woo AD, and trading away Moore probably isn't going to fetch much. Courtney Lee. A 39% career three-point shooter, Lee has played in only 10 games for the Knicks this season as they try to get an extended look at their young players. The 33-year-old is owed $12.7 million next season, which could scare teams away, but a desperate team in need of wing help could do a lot worse than Lee. Alex Abrines has missed the last month or so for personal reasons, and it appears he has been jumped in the rotation by young athletes Terrence Ferguson and Hamidou Diallo. With Andre Roberson still expected to return at some point this season, that doesn't leave a lot of room for Abrines, a 6'6" shooter who many teams around the league could find a use for. Terrence Ross. Since the offense is always coveted in the NBA, and Ross fits the bill on an expiring contract, he would serve as a hired mercenary to help an offensively challenged second unit on a playoff team, so the Magic will likely receive a few offers. Markelle Fultz. The Fultz saga is well documented, and most would agree that the best thing for both parties is for him to get a fresh start with a new franchise. That's easier said than done, since the 76ers have pretty much zero leverage given the way the 2017 number 1 overall pick has started his career. That being said, all the moving parts around the trade deadline could provide the right opportunity for the Sixers to strike a deal. Dragan Bender. Also a former number 4 overall pick, Bender is a 7-footer capable of stretching out to the three-point line. He's been largely a non-factor this season after a pitiful 2017-18 campaign, but he's been able to showcase his talent a bit recently, with DeAndre Ayton and Richaun Holmes sidelined with injuries. Some team might want to take a chance on Bender's upside, and the asking price won't be high. Maurice Harkless has been decent in limited action this season due to injury, but the Blazers could part ways with him in order to upgrade on the wing. He's owed $11 million next season, a manageable number for a team who believes in him, and Portland could dangle him in order to get a shakeup on the roster. Skal Labissiere showed promise last season before the Kings drafted another power forward in Marvin Bagley III, signed Bjelica and got back a healthy Harry Giles. Now Labissiere is on the outside looking in, but he has the size and skill set to intrigue teams around the league, particularly struggling teams looking to catch lightning in a bottle. Marco Bellinelli just keeps on doing what he does, so the only question is whether it'd be beneficial for the Spurs for him to do it on another team. We saw what Bellinelli did for the 76ers last postseason, so some team could be quite eager to get his services and make the Spurs an offer they can't refuse. Norman Powell is overpaid for a guy who plays less than 20 minutes per game, but the Raptors gave him that money for a reason. Toronto's depth is well noted, and the addition of Patrick McCaw, longer and more versatile than Powell, makes Powell's position on the team a bit tenuous. Perhaps the Raptors throw in a future second-rounder to help get his contract off the books, or perhaps another team thinks it can turn him into a significant rotation player. Either way, Powell could be on his way out. Thabo Sefolosha has been out since early January with a hamstring injury, but wasn't exactly a huge part of the rotation before that. With the emergence of Royce O'Neal, Sefolosha may be expendable, and he's one of those names that's automatically associated with a defensive stopper. A contending team could swoop him up for a potential playoff battle against a lethal scorer. Trevor Ariza. Wait, didn't he just get here? Ariza hasn't had the type of impact the Wizards were hoping for when they acquired him from Phoenix, but they can still flip him as long as he's not traded in combination with other players. There are plenty of playoff teams who would love to get Ariza, including his former Houston Rockets, so he's definitely one to keep an eye on as the deadline approaches.